And welcome back to Racing Rundown. This is our second of 3 previews that we're going to have upcoming this weekend. I've already done a preview for the Pegasus World Cup. Eric, later on this week, will have a preview of the Pegasus World Cup Turf. And then also this video, which is a preview of the Southwest at Oaklawn, as you can tell by the title of this. We've got 9 horses lined up for this race, 20 points on the line to the winner for the Kentucky Derby, and we'll get into all 9 of the horses in this race. With the little housekeeping out of the way, we'll move right into this and start off with the number 1 horse in this race, Sun Thunder for Ken McPeek. A very nice last out winner Sun Thunder was for trainer Ken McPeek. Didn't win first out, but his first out start was a good race, all things considered. Determinedly, who was second to Arabian Knight, who's also in this race, in one of his early career races, won that maiden race by 7 1/4 lengths, and determinedly subsequently has won back from that race. So, Sun Thunder was going up against a tough horse there, but he showed up very well over this Oaklawn surface on New Year's Eve, won by 6 1/2 lengths, going a mile, and he fits very well into this group of horses that have good, either a good last out maiden win or are coming into this race with a powerful stakes victory, which is a little bit, you've got some questions about it. So I don't think Sun Thunder is completely without a chance in this race. I think that 10-1 is a very interesting price on the morning line, and he's potentially a horse that I'm going to look to use underneath in this spot. And now we're going to move on to number 2 in this race, and that's Corona Bolt, who fits into that same archetype, with the exception of he's coming out of a stakes win. 2 for 2 in his career. He's by Bolt Doro out of the mare Storm Before the Calm, and he's a half to multiple stakes placed Proven Strategies, who is a good turf or decent turf horse. Definitely did his better running the shorter they went, but had some good turf races back in 2019 and 2020 on occasions. Corona Bolt's done his running on the dirt so far. His victory last out in the Sugar Bowl was a very, very strong victory for him, just under 7 lengths over some decent enough horses from stakes competition, who had been in stakes competition in prior starts. The big question, there's 2 big questions. Number 1 is, will he stretch out? I'm not 100% sure. He's 6-1 on the morning line. I think that might be accounting, number 1, for the amount of money that Arabian Knight and Bob Baffert's going to take in this race, but also because he is a little bit unproven. He is unproven around 2 turns. This will be his first start there. I don't think he's without a chance to stretch out because he ran so well last time at the fairgrounds, but there are horses that are definitely sure bets to stretch out in this race. So, and also the 3 best horses in this race all want to go and be up forwardly placed early, so that might also be a challenge that Corona Bolt runs into. But he's a very talented horse. If this doesn't work out for him, there's certainly races going 1 turn. This won't be the last time you see him in stakes company and getting respect in stakes company, because he's a nice horse in his own right. And now we're going to move on to number 3, Jace's Road, the second of 3 Brad Cox horses in this race. Brad Cox is on track to have a third of the Derby field at this rate with the amount of 3-year-olds that he has in his barn. And Jace's Road is coming out of a very strong victory in the Gunrunner Stakes, where he beat Determinedly last time by 5 1/2 lengths, and Determinedly was a head away from being second in there, so Determinedly was beaten third in there. But Jace's Road, if you go back to his race 3 back in the Iroquois, he improved so much from the Iroquois through into the Gunrunner. You can kind of absolutely dismiss the street sense, because he dropped the rider in the warm-up before the race when they were loading, and he ran free for about a furlong in the early part of the race, so that the street sense was just kind of a wash for him. But his run in the Gunrunner, he showed so much improvement from his 3rd place effort. And I really didn't like him going into the Gunrunner because I didn't trust the Iroquois effort, and I didn't really like the horses coming out of the Iroquois, and I still don't really, but Jace's Road turned in a really solid effort there, and you definitely have to give him his respect for that, going the distance of this race, which is not something that you can say for Corona Bolt and Arabian Knight, who are the 2 chief threats to him. I'm not going to pick him in this race because I do think Arabian Knight has more talent than him, but this doesn't take a genius genius to figure this out, but if Arabian Knight isn't all that maiden victory indicated that he could be, or if he has trouble transitioning to facing winners, then Jace's Road is going to run a massive race here. Very likely will be the winner. But like I said, I respect him much more coming out of the Gunrunner, but I'm going to ultimately defer to Arabian Knight. We'll get to that when we get to him. We'll move on now to the number 4 horse in this race. That's Western Ghent for Dwayne Lucas, just kind of here for the party. Western Ghent has run in 9 races to this point. Only 1 victory, and that was at the maiden claiming level. And his stakes efforts have left a whole lot to be desired. 6th in the Hopeful, 10th in the Street Sense, 9th in the Kentucky Jockey Club, 4th in the Smarty Jones. That's all you really need to say about him. He's a massive outsider in this race. It would be a huge shock if he wins this race. Moving on to the number 5 horse in this race, another outsider, the second of 2 Ken McPeak horses in this race. Frosted Departure is this guy, but I don't think Frosted Departure is as hopeless as the horse to his inside, but Frosted Departure is also got a tough task against him because he's also never been a horse to compete at the graded stakes level, and he does have a victory last time out at Oaklawn in the Renaissance Stakes on New Year's Eve, which is one of those 2 stakes that Oaklawn ran on New Year's Eve for the 2-year-olds. But you look at his graded stakes efforts: 7th in the Street Sense, 10th in the Breeders' Futurity, and it was also beaten in the Ed Brown and the Advent shorter races. So it's not a stretch out problem or anything. It's just a talent thing. 15-1, maybe you might want to play around, see if he can, especially if you think that the top 3 in this race are going to go fast early and kind of burn each other out. I'm not really sure whether or not I think that's going to happen, but if you want to bet on that, bank on that, I don't think it's ridiculous to make a case that Frosted Departure could, at the minimum, hit the board in this race. And we're going to move on now to the number 6 horse in this race. I've really been referencing him the whole time. Arabian Knight, and Bob Baffert has this kind of horse every single year, coming out of a very impressive maiden victory, jumping into a Kentucky Derby prep competition. We've seen this movie before. I'm just going with number 1. The victory was very strong. I was at the Breeders' Cup. It struck me as a very strong win. Determinedly is obviously a nice horse in his own right, and for him to beat that kind of a horse who's won on multiple occasions by 7 1/4 lengths while wrapped up, certainly speaks volumes to the level of talent that he has. And also, this is a Bob Baffert 3-year-old. What more do you need me to say? These kind of horses he has every single year. So I'm not going to play around in this race. He is stretching out, going 2 turns for the first time. There is other speed in this race, but at the same time, he's coming out of a very strong maiden victory, and this is the Bob Baffert formula, so he'll be my top selection in this race. And now we're going to move on to the number 7 horse in this race, and that's Red Route 1 for Steve Asmussen, his representative in this race. Red Route 1 had a good placing effort a few starts back, or more than a few starts back now, but in the Breeders' Futurity, he was 3rd in that race, but he really hasn't really taken a big step forward, and I just said really twice. I apologize for being redundant there, but well beaten in the Kentucky Jockey Club, well beaten in the Street Sense, and I don't really think that underneath Instant Coffee, the Kentucky Jockey Club was all that strong of a race, and same thing with the Street Sense. 2 Phils ran a nice race to win there, but not really a whole lot of quality competition that I see from that. Kind of a more sure thing, I guess, if you think that the race is going to fall apart than a Frosted Departure is, because at least he has, board finishing efforts. 2 of his stakes efforts were board finishing races. But I'm going to stay away from both of those horses with who I end up using underneath in this race, just because I'm going to try to make some money with a new horse on the scene, and we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get through later in this preview. We're going to move on now, though, to the number 8 horse, the final of the 3 Brad Cox horses in this race, and that's Hit Show for Manny Franco, who ships down to ride this race. I already mentioned the 3rd Brad Cox entry for this race. He's coming out of a nice victory in a mile allowance race at Oaklawn, where he won by just over 3 lengths, broke his maiden at Keeneland in decent fashion, was beaten in the middle in a allowance at Churchill, which is the reason that I'm a little bit dubious about him. I mean, he was beaten by confidence game, who's decent, but he was 6.5 lengths behind the third place finisher in that race. So as good as and I thought that his allowance victory at Oaklawn was a nice race, and it stacks him up well with the rest of the horses, with the rest of the lower 2/3 of this race. But like I said, there are a couple other horses that I think in front of him have a better chance to hit the board in this race. So Hit Show is a horse that I'm going to leave off of what I'm doing for this race. And we're going to move on to the final horse now. The longest price on the morning line, I don't think he's the least, the most hopeless horse, I should say, in this race. That's El Tomate, who's coming out of a maiden victory at Remington Park. It was a nice victory at Remington Park, but it was Remington Park. And what was he really beating there? Not really a whole lot. Morning line maker at Oaklawn seems to really not respect that, and I understand that. I mean, I could make a case that Western Ghent should be the longer price of the two, but really it's 6 1/2 tails in the other with those two horses, so not really going to waste too much time with El Tomate. He's an outsider. Maybe, he'll surprise and run okay in this race, but I'm going to look elsewhere. As I already said, Frosted Departure is going to be the horse that I'm going to use on top in here. I'm not going to string together a try because, it's using two favorites, and then what I'm going to do, though, my on top pick, and then I'm going to say the horse that I think you have the best chance to get some kind of value from underneath, and that's Sun Thunder. Like I said, the top three horses in this race all have speed: Arabian Knight, Jace's Road, and Corona Bolt. It's quite possible that they go fast and one of those horses fades, or it opens up the opportunity for somebody to close in and get something. So I think Sun Thunder is that horse. Like I said, I really did like his maiden victory last out at Oaklawn, and I already referenced his effort where he was beaten on debut by Determinedly. So he's got some upside for him. I think that this is, if you're looking to play any kind of show wager in this race, I'm not really too sure how much you'll be able to make off of that. But like I said, when we have these short fields like this, or these races where it's kind of the races really cut and dry, this is what I do. I give you my win pick, and I give you my horse that I think at a price could run well for you underneath, and I think that's Sun Thunder. So with that being said, that's it for this preview. Be sure to check out my Pegasus preview and Eric's Pegasus Turf preview that will be coming later in the week, and also episode 195 of Racing Rundown, where we will preview the full card, or the entire stakes cards for this Oaklawn card, as well as the Pegasus card, and other regional races as well. We'll see you for that. Have a good one.